On today's episode of the Redeemed Marriage Podcast, we're going to be talking about boundaries. We talk about boundaries a good bit on this podcast, but today we're going to be talking specifically about boundaries as it relates to members of the opposite sex outside of your marriage, and also how does jealousy play a part in that? So stay tuned. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Redeemed Marriage Podcast. This is Rusty and Heather Bryant. We're excited to be back with you for a new topic, and I say it's a new topic, but it's a topic that we weave into lots of episodes because I would say this is one of the more hot topics, probably, maybe a little controversial to some people, but it's one of those, too, that whenever we post something about boundaries on social media, it probably gets the biggest response. And sometimes I wonder if that's just because one spouse or the other is like, yeah, my spouse don't have any boundaries, so I'm about to just agree with this so that they know that they're a fool. I don't know.
And then people like sending it to, listen to this.
Yeah.
Send it to your spouse and say, listen to this. I do think it is a controversial topic because I don't think that everybody agrees with the level of boundaries that we talk about. Mm-hmm. I think that each marriage may have different boundaries and where that line should be, especially when it comes to friendships with the opposite sex. And, just to be upfront, we probably have more extreme boundaries than most people do, but we also are probably a lot more passionate about why we have those boundaries than most people are as well.
Yeah, we have the boundaries in place and we're passionate about it because we know what happens when you don't have those boundaries in place or when you keep moving the line closer and closer to something that can be destructive. And so for us, we just we have extreme boundaries in place because, of course, our story is that we've walked through infidelity. And so just almost 12 years ago, Heather confessed to being unfaithful in our marriage. And so since that time, we have really put up some extreme boundaries because, well, we have to. And we know that we don't want something like that to ever happen again. But at the same time, we preach it to other people because we've lived it, Sure. And so you can tell us all you want to, oh, y'all are crazy, or oh, that doesn't apply to us, or we're different. Our relationship's different, and we're okay doing it that way. And that's fine, but we're just telling you from our story and from our experience. We know the things that took place that got us to that point, and so we're just saying these are some massive red flags. And so if you want to stay as far away from that as you possibly can, then you need these boundaries and you need to put these extreme boundaries in place.
That's right. I think that for us, I was the one that had friendship relationships with guys more so than you. In high school, my friends were more your friends than I had my own friends. Mm-hmm. And even in college, I had good friends in college, but we hung out a lot with either groups with guys and girls, or we hung out with your friends a lot. And I was kind of a tomboy growing up, played sports, I wasn't a really girly girl. And so I did have a lot of guy friends. Even when I was little, like in the neighborhood, I hung out with the guys. We went crawdad fishing and, building forts and all of that stuff instead of being inside playing Barbies. Like that just wasn't my personality. So in high school and college, I oftentimes said I'm so much more comfortable around guys than I am around girls. And I think I used that as an excuse later on to where you would, if you did feel uncomfortable about a friendship, I would just, play that card again. Mm-hmm. That, it's easier to talk to them. When we would go to parties, I would be in the den with the guys watching the football game versus in the kitchen with the girls talking about whatever. And so I've had to kind of make myself do those things as I've gotten older, pulling myself out of those what I called natural relationships or friendships for me, and been more purposeful in being having relationship with girls. So I'm just saying, for me, like, if you're that person that's listening and thinking, but I just get along better with the guys, I just did, blah, blah, blah. I've been there. Like, I know what that feels like, but then it's also very easy to use as an excuse or a crutch when it comes to that, having a conversation with your spouse about that.
Mm-hmm. So what do you do if, we did mention the difference and how do you mix or how do you look at boundaries as putting boundaries in place, not because somebody's jealous, because I think that sometimes there's this fine line of, a spouse saying, well, you're just wanting me to put this boundary in place because you're jealous of something. Mm-hmm. All right. So in a situation like that, like you're talking about, how does a spouse, how do you handle that to where you talk about it or you put boundaries in place without it just coming across as, oh, you're just jealous because you don't want me talking to another guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's real important to make sure you're listening to the heart behind what they're saying. When we would go to different events and you were in the den with me as we were watching football games or whatever, that wasn't a big deal because you were there. Like, you were there and you were part of it. I think the problem is when you hear more of this discussion when the other spouse is not around. We have someone that we kind of journey with and walk with that has trouble with this in the gym context. Going to a gym and being around people and working out with people and encouraging people of the opposite sex, and their spouse had trouble with that and was having issues with that. And to me, that's not jealousy. Like, that's real concern of trying to protect your marriage. Mm-hmm. That's different than just, being jealous of somebody. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I just I just know that there's people out there, because when you talk about, putting up boundaries and, being careful with friendships of the opposite sex, people get really defensive about that kind of thing. And, justifying it however they want to justify it, there's a real pushback from a lot of people. And, there's the pushback of, oh, no, we're just friends, I can handle it. Mm-hmm. There's nothing else besides that going on. And, or there's I'm going to the gym and the gym's full of people of the opposite sex. Mm-hmm. And it's okay for us to encourage each other and to, that kind of thing. And then, I have to talk to this member of the opposite sex, or I have to be around them all of the time because of work or whatever it is. So you have all of those kind of built-in excuses, and if you're not careful when your spouse says something about it or shows some concern, then it's not they're trying to protect your marriage or raising, these red flags that they're seeing or feeling. It just becomes a real jealousy thing. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, from you being that person that was on the side of, really pushing the boundaries there, and then, pushing them so far that it got you into the situation that you were in, how do you, what should the other spouse do, to try to help that situation? How should they communicate? What are the talking points, and what should be done in a healthy way?
Well, I just remember when we were going through that, I can look back and see that I always was moving the line. Like, if you were uncomfortable with something, And I mean, just anything, going to the gym or working out with somebody, or even talking to somebody at the soccer field or whatever. If you mentioned it, I got really, really defensive. And then not only would I get defensive, but once I explained it away, I kind of envisioned the line moving just a little bit further. Like, okay, I got him to understand why I'm doing this. So now that's okay. And maybe I push it a little bit further because I explained it, what I thought explained it so well that then you understood. I think that, so what I'm trying to say in that is if you feel yourself getting defensive about it, there might be a reason for that.
Yeah.
Like there may be a reason that you're not listening to what your spouse is genuinely saying and letting that, letting that kind of soak in and really think about it and ponder it and pray about it. If your first reaction is, I am not, blah, 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 and you get into a defensive mode, to me, that's just a really big red flag, that is something that you need to take a hard, look at. Because I didn't at all. When you would mention things, it was, all out defend and justify. Defend and justify. Defend and justify. And then the next thing would come along and I would, again, well, I did it because of this or that, this, it's nothing. I promise you, just defensive. And to me, that's just a huge red flag.
Yeah, and so I would just echo that. And this is some real talk right here and real hard. I'm going to be very blunt with people that are listening. And if you are one of those people that's something that happens, and you're defensive, you get really defensive, then I'm saying from experience that you really need to check your heart. Because I remember, like, those are some real hard and raw feelings for me, because I remember you living that way for so long. And I also remember trying to approach it every now and then, but also being so incredibly scared because of how I knew you were going to react.
Right.
And if you're in a relationship, if you and your spouse are in a relationship where that's happening, and you're one of if you're one of those that's getting defensive or always justifying, then I'm just telling you to check your heart, because it's probably not your spouse. Now, I do know that there are some very controlling spouses out there. They want to know, where are you 24 hours a day, and it's unhealthy to a point where they're not really that concerned about the marriage. They are just trying to control you. I understand that. There are those situations, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the spouse that, because of things that are going on, there's just red flags, and either they don't know how to communicate it, or they keep communicating it to you, and it's in a way that it's putting you kind of in the corner, and so you don't like it. There's got to be a time where you sit down and you talk like a husband and a wife that love each other and don't want anything to happen to your marriage, so you're actually going to have the discussion.
Right. And, it's not always the spouse saying something that you're doing. Like, there's also the aspect of, I don't like the way that guy acts around you. And it may not have anything to do with you and how you're acting, but how somebody is acting around you or towards you. Or, if you're somewhere with your spouse and at a work thing and your spouse is like, that guy is, way too flirty, and that's not something you're doing. Like, it's not even something you're responding to, but you have to be aware that they can also see that in ways that you can't.
Yeah, because they are that member of the opposite sex.
Right.
So and I know we've had some conversations with couples before where, a couple has said, this person, like, I see what they're doing because I was that person.
That's right.
And like, I believe that about you. Like, I believe that you can look at people and you can go, that was me.
Absolutely.
But in the same way, even times when I would bring things up, I could bring things up to you because I knew what the guy was thinking. Like, I know what a guy's thinking,
Right.
and how, if I see a guy flirting, I know what he's doing.
Right.
And so, and it may not be that somebody's flirting because they want to have an affair, but what does that flirting lead to?
That's right.
You never know, because it just keeps pushing the boundary and pushing the boundary and pushing the boundary, just like we talked about.
That's right.
So I think that and here's the big thing for me: if you feel like your spouse is being jealous when they're asking you to put boundaries up, you need to obviously have a conversation. But I would always err on the side of, well, that's fine.
Right.
I mean, what is, really, what is the danger in, let's just say let's just throw it all out and say, okay, well, your spouse is being jealous, okay? And you just say, well, I'm not going to put up boundaries because you're just being jealous. Well, what is the danger in putting those boundaries up and protecting your marriage, know? And again, that's I'm being very superficial right there, surface level. I'm not even really, we're not going deep at all, but it really kind of does come down to what's more important. I mean, your marriage is more important. Now, then get to the root of the whole thing, and let's talk about, why are you being jealous, and can we work this out in a healthy way instead of childish or whatever it might be.
Right. I can remember times where I thought, gosh, he's just jealous. Like, there's nothing to this. Like, the, relationships that I was having outside, not outside, but with the opposite sex is what I was trying to say. I would be like, this really isn't a big deal at all. And I can remember thinking that you were just being jealous. But if I had just shifted my perspective to one of two things. One being, he's just trying to be proactive and being protective of our marriage. Instead of using the word jealous, if I could have shifted and thought he's just being protective of me and seeing that as a gift, all women, I shouldn't say all women, most women dream of a knight in shining armor and a guy who will be her protector and all of those. And that's what you were doing. But I was looking through the wrong lens at that and seeing it more of, you were hindering me and you were squelching me and you were not letting me thrive, and that you were being jealous, when I should have just shifted my perspective in that. And then the second way is, I can look back and think, if you had relationships and friendships with the opposite sex like I did, I would have blown a gasket. Mm-hmm. Like, if I had just been able to see it through your eyes, or put myself in your shoes, and been like, okay, well, what if I was the one that was feeling like, gosh, he is being real overly kind to these people, or that person, or he's really flirting in a way that he just thinks is being kind, but he's, I see it as flirting. So being able to see things from your perspective and putting myself in your shoes, and then also shifting my focus onto why, and seeing it as a sweet and tender and kind thing instead of a controlling thing.
Yeah. I think a big part of this is being able to communicate in a healthy way without having to, be defensive and be jealous and point fingers. It's, hey, we want to do everything we can to protect our marriage. So how are we gonna do that? So in the last few minutes, why don't we just throw out, and I know that we've done this on episodes before, but sometimes I think back, like, we get so many people that fill out our survey, and people that ask us questions on social media, and they're always asking us, and a lot of times my first thought is, well, did they not listen to our podcast? I mean, like, we just talked about that,
just like one 3 months ago or whatever.
That's right. And yeah, I mean, we have, I don't know, it's like over 110 or something episodes. So, trying to go back and pick out all the ones about boundary. I mean, I'm sure out of 110, we've probably done 5 or 6 of them about boundaries. But like, let's just throw out some of the really practical things that we do now as far as boundaries when it comes to members of the opposite sex. Again, I think we've shared some of these before, but it'd be a good time to just kind of rehash them.
Well, I think the number one thing is having an open discussion and dialogue about it. If you're uncomfortable about something, or if something bothers you, or if you're unsure about something, being able just to communicate with each other and not feel, like you said, you were scared to talk to me about it, or you were scared of the way I was going to react. Just to be able to have an open communication about it. I think that's number one. Just, hey, that made me uncomfortable. Being able to share that.
Yeah. And me looking back on 12 years ago, like, I really feel like that's one of my biggest downfalls and responsibilities in what happened, is that I wasn't persistent enough in the actions that I saw you taking. And I know, again, you can go back and listen to our story, but I know that I approached it a couple of times early on before anything was happening. And again, you got so defensive and blew it off. And then, like you said, you just pushed that line a little bit further. And I got to the point where I was like, I don't want to bring this up anymore.
I don't want to rock the boat.
And I think that there's two things, the two reasons for that. And this is where you and your spouse, I mean, both of you, whoever's listening to this is where the red flag comes in. If one or both of you has this belief that, and Heather has said this was in the very first Inside the Mind of an Adulterer. This was what the whole premise of it was that you thought it could never happen to me. And if you have that attitude, that type of attitude, and even if you're the spouse that's looking at your spouse doing something and you're like, I mean, it's fine. I know nothing could ever happen. I know nothing's going to ever happen. And if you're the one that's just pushing the line a little bit further, or you're doing innocent flirting or whatever, and you just keep telling yourself, well, nothing else is going to ever happen. If you're finding yourself convincing yourself of that over and over and justifying, then that's the red flag.
That's right.
So if that's the case, then you need to have the conversation. That's where I wish that I could go back and say, all right, we're going to just sit down, no matter how much this hurts, no matter
how mad I get.
Yeah, no matter how mad, no matter how defensive. And then again, I did do that one time for sure, and I can remember a couple of times along the way, but never to the point. I mean, I feel like I just kind of threw my hands up, and it was that, well, nothing. She
nothing's gonna happen.
Her personality's never gonna change. I believed that lie of yours too. That, oh, this is just my personality. This is who I am. Live with me. This is who you fell in love with. You might as well, get over it. That kind of thing. But if we had both been in a place in our hearts where we would have thought, man, the enemy wants to destroy our marriage. And how does he destroy marriages? Well, he gets one spouse or the other to be unfaithful or to break trust or anything that he can do. And so if we truly believed that, then we would have been way more proactive. And so if you're listening to this and you're like, okay, I do believe that. I believe that the enemy wants to destroy my marriage. That doesn't mean that I think I'm going to go have an affair, but that's how the enemy wants to destroy my marriage. So what am I going to do? I'm going to put up extreme boundaries.
That's right.
Like, I will do whatever it takes. And so that's having the hard conversations when you need to have the hard conversations. That's also no secrets. If there's some form of a relationship or something that you feel like you're always having to hide, even if you believe that it's innocent, but you're hiding it from your spouse because you don't want them to be jealous or worried about it, or because you think it's innocent, That's massive
That's
red
right.
flag.
That's right. And not even just hiding it, as in, I'm not going to tell them I have this relationship, but even like, I'm not going to tell them that I ran into them, or I'm not going to tell them that they texted, or I'm not, just because they'll get mad. And there's just no reason for them to get mad, in the trying to quote protect your spouse. That's not honoring. And that brings me to what I wanted to say. My second thing is just to honor your spouse, like to honor them with your actions, with your words, with your relationships. I know that there's certain things that the boundaries that I put up, I put them up because they are honoring to you. Mm-hmm. They are respectful to you. And if you think that some of those boundaries are squelching am I saying that word right? That's the second time I've said squashing who you are and squashing your personality and all of those things. That's from the enemy. Like that's not truth. Because God's not going to call you into a relationship with somebody that is dishonoring towards your spouse. So just that open line of communication and choosing to honor your spouse with your actions and relationships are by far the two most important things to me. And I think that those are overarching umbrella things to all the detailed small things that we can say, specific things that we say, like,
don't be alone.
Don't be alone. That's right.
Of the opposite sex.
Absolutely. When we text, if I text somebody of the opposite sex, it's with you in it, or another. If it's something that you're part of, I put you in it. If it's somebody at work, I put another female friend that I work with in it. It's just constantly trying to be aware of text messages. Now, there are times, we've talked about this, just so people don't panic when they hear this. There are times where there's we call it a business transaction of something that, especially at work, where it's like, hey, we're leaving for lunch at 2:30 or whatever. That's just that, but that's not deep conversation.
And even in that, the danger comes when you start having an open-ended conversation with that person.
Right.
So even if that's through social media or whatever, and you're saying, "How was your day?" or "How are things going today?" or even, "I just wanted you to know I prayed for you." I mean, that kind of stuff is so dangerous, and you're probably thinking, what? How can that be dangerous to pray for somebody? I mean, prayer and praying with and for somebody is one of the most intimate things that can happen. So, all of that. Yeah, we could go through little things, but I think it's the bigger things of respecting, your spouse and being willing to put those extreme boundaries up, because what you're saying to your spouse is you're more important than any of these other relationships or any of these other things. And sometimes, like we said, you have to be even a little bit more. I'll just throw out one, for us, the gym, you not having a membership to a gym, like that's very honoring and respectful of me because of our past history. And again, I don't know that I would ever be comfortable just because of the wounds and the hurt there.
Sure.
And so
that doesn't mean that's for everybody, but for us, that's an open conversation that we have, and we were able to fix it. And that's the thing. Like, so many people are like, well, what do you mean I can't have a membership to a gym? Well, my membership right now is with a bar class that I go, and it's all women.
Yep.
Like, there are solutions to the problem.
That's right.
Working out with your spouse.
Yep.
I had a conversation with somebody not too long ago that she was like, I'm going to bring my spouse with me to the gym. Like, even though he doesn't do that kind of workout, just to be an encouragement to her and to watch what she does. And I mean, there's always ways, if you have that open line of communication, that you can work out something that is comfortable for both of you.
Yep.
And you're being respectful in doing that.
Yep. Well, I got
off on a tangent.
The main thing is your marriage is worth extreme boundaries, and it's worth having the hard conversations about. So we want to encourage you to do that in your marriage. Make sure that there's no secrets, there's nothing uncomfortable going on, and communicate, and make your marriage worth every boundary that you set up. All right, let's wrap it up.
See you guys next
See
week.
you next time.